Tonight's Survivor Series takes place from the Amway Center in Orlando, Florida, inside the WWE Thunderdome, and like it's been for the last 4 or 5 years now, it's Raw versus SmackDown, and arguably the biggest match on the show. I say the biggest match because the biggest thing on the show for me is the final farewell of The Undertaker. We've done a preview on that, that's on the channel, be sure to check that out. But the biggest match on the show, without a shadow of a doubt, is the WWE Champion Drew McIntyre going up against the WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns. It's Raw's WWE Champion versus SmackDown's Universal Champion, as we've seen in recent years. And there has been so much that has happened leading to this match, because it was a completely different match only 7 days ago that we were expecting to see. Now, as I mentioned, tonight at Survivor Series, Universal Champion Roman Reigns will battle the newly crowned WWE Champion Drew McIntyre. This is just 6 days after McIntyre won the WWE Championship for the second time in his career, defeating Randy Orton on Monday Night Raw this past week. Now, what's interesting about that is Drew McIntyre only lost the WWE Championship previously to Randy Orton only a few weeks ago at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view in October. This was after months and months of matches, storylines and rivalries between Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. Finally, we got Randy Orton win the championship. Then it has Drew McIntyre win it back just days later. Now, what's interesting about this feud, or this mini feud, I suppose, with Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns heading into Survivor Series, is that it really wasn't on the cards. And then, 10 days ago or so, suddenly Drew McIntyre appears on SmackDown. And this is just days before his rematch against Randy Orton on Raw. Drew McIntyre steps over to SmackDown, and he made it clear to Roman Reigns that he was going to be facing him at Survivor Series. He was going to beat Randy Orton on Monday on Raw, reclaim the WWE Championship, and it would be the Scottish psychopath versus the big dog at Survivor Series when it was Raw versus SmackDown. And that's exactly what we've got. Now, Roman Reigns on SmackDown has positioned himself as the head of the table, the center of the island of relevancy on SmackDown. But what's interesting is that during these promos, during these back and forths between McIntyre and Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre has been very quick to remind Roman Reigns that he indeed was the one that eliminated Roman Reigns on his way to winning the Royal Rumble earlier this year, and that led to him becoming the WWE Champion at WrestleMania, defeating Brock Lesnar. So this rise of Drew McIntyre does actually come through Roman Reigns at certain points as well, which is fascinating to see as well. As far as I'm aware, they don't have a ton of big match history. Of course, Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre, the times that I can recall them facing off was during the whole Roman Reigns Shane McMahon feud that we like to forget about from 2019, which of course involved The Undertaker's tag team match with Roman Reigns against Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon at Extreme Rules in 2019. But apart from that, do Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre have a lot of singles history against each other? I don't think so. But there's been certainly an issue bubbling under the surface the last few weeks on SmackDown, where Drew McIntyre has been making his appearance. Of course, Drew McIntyre defeated Jey Uso in the main event when he appeared on SmackDown a couple of weeks ago in an unsanctioned match, because a Raw superstar can't appear on SmackDown. Some of these rules are just complete BS when it comes to brand loyalty. I am going to be doing a preview of the 5-on-5 male tag team Survivor Series match that's going to be dropping on the channel as well. So really be sure to check that out, because I'll give my opinions on brand loyalty and why a superstar would be loyal to Raw or SmackDown even though they've been on the brand, 3-4 weeks at most. Nevertheless, I, like everyone else, am very much looking forward to this Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns match tonight at Survivor Series. I think it's, as I mentioned, it's the match that's the biggest match on the show. I think it's probably the match everyone's looking forward to. I think people, when they think of Survivor Series this year, it does feel to me like, I don't want to say there's a lack of build, but there is just such a lack of story between the brand supremacy and Raw versus SmackDown. It's a tired and played out story at this point, and it's been overdone. The rosters have been kept separate due to the pandemic, which is fine, but yet they've still persisted with the pay-per-view, which is odd to me. Survivor Series doesn't have to be a trumped up bragging rights or anything like that. I don't understand why they do that. there just hasn't been a lot of story. Nevertheless, the things everyone are talking about and looking forward to heading into Survivor Series tonight, of course, is the final farewell of The Undertaker, and I think this Drew McIntyre-Roman Reigns match. Obviously, there's other good matches on the show. There is Asuka versus Sasha Banks, Bobby Lashley, Sami Zayn, the 5-on-5 matches, but I think this is the big one, isn't it? This is the big match. This is the big match, and so much has happened. So much has happened when it comes to this feud, or this match at Survivor Series, because it was originally meant to be Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns. But plans changed. How often have we heard that? Plans change. It's the third time in recent Survivor Series history that plans have changed when it comes to the WWE Championship picture and this champion versus champion, world champion versus world champion match at Survivor Series. And it does lead you to question why Randy Orton won the WWE Championship in the first place. I know I'm questioning that. And you question not only, okay, why did Drew McIntyre Randy Orton win the WWE Championship at Hell in a Cell, but why did Drew McIntyre lose it at Hell in a Cell as well? If the objective was to have Randy Orton have a run with the WWE Championship, which I don't think it was, I think their objective was to get the title on Orton for Edge versus Orton at WrestleMania next year. Nevertheless, if you wanted to just have Randy Orton have a title run, you should have given him the championship at SummerSlam when he was on a roll. At that point, Randy Orton had kicked the likes of The Big Show, Edge, Christian, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels. He kicked them all in the skull, had this momentum, brought back the Legend Killer character, and then what happens? He loses at SummerSlam, clean. It was a backslide, but it was a clean finish. You then have him lose at Clash of Champions. Yes, there were people that interfered. Nevertheless, it was another victory for Drew McIntyre. Sandwiched between those two defeats, Randy Orton put over Keith Lee clean at Payback as well. Randy Orton's done nothing but lose. And then after all of these losses, he then wins the WWE Championship over a guy that has barely done any jobs for a year, that being Drew McIntyre. So it was just very, very odd. It was very, very odd. And then after Randy Orton losing again on Monday Night Raw, Randy Orton just loses all the time. Now, it doesn't affect Randy Orton's character. It doesn't affect Randy Orton's status or anything like that. Randy Orton is Randy Orton. He's a 14-time world champion. He's a future first ballot Hall of Famer. He's the Legend Killer. He's the Viper. Him putting over people or doing jobs is never going to affect him. Randy Orton is bulletproof at this point. But the booking doesn't make sense. Regardless of if Randy Orton's bulletproof, the booking doesn't make sense. The booking did make sense when Randy Orton won the WWE Championship, because everyone assumed we're getting Edge, Orton, WrestleMania, WWE Championship, rumours of an I Quit match, but everyone knew that Edge versus Randy Orton's happening. The WWE Championship had been rumoured to be added to that storyline. It made sense. Now Drew McIntyre wins it back and everyone's scratching their heads again. Where's the direction for this? And sometimes that's a good thing. You know, you don't always want to know where you're going. It's good to be left in the dark a little bit as a fan, as a viewer. But I think at this point, you scratch your head because it's very obvious that plans have changed again. Plans have very changed again. There's now rumours of Edge versus The Fiend at WrestleMania. Is Edge versus Randy Orton even going to happen? Or maybe Edge and Beth Phoenix versus The Fiend and Alexa Bliss. It's all very short term, isn't it? It's all very short term. It does give you the impression that maybe they had Randy Orton win the WWE Championship at Hell in a Cell, and then they go, brilliant, okay, let's move on to Randy Orton versus Edge at WrestleMania. And then they went, oh, by the way, what's the next pay-per-view? What, Survivor Series? Oh, wait, Roman Reigns is the world champion. He's a heel. Randy Orton's now the WWE champion. He's a heel. Oh my God, we've got two heels as the world champion. We're going to have to do a heel versus heel match, which Vince McMahon doesn't like to do. They then decide, oh damn, we need a babyface versus heel match. So they have to change it, and they have to change the WWE Championship. And it's the third time they've done it right before Survivor Series. 2017, it was going to be Brock Lesnar versus Jinder Mahal. WWE decided they didn't want to do that match. They switched the title. AJ Styles beats Jinder Mahal. It's Brock versus AJ Styles. The following year, we were going to get Brock Lesnar versus AJ Styles again. They decide they don't want to do that match again. Daniel Bryan defeats AJ Styles on the SmackDown before Survivor Series. Instead, we get Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan. Coming into this year, we were going to get Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns. They decide they don't want to do that. We have Randy Orton lose the WWE Championship to Drew McIntyre. Instead, it's Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns. It's the third time they have done this, and it just shows you how quickly plans change, but more importantly, it shows the lack of planning when it comes to Survivor Series and when it comes to that WWE or Universal Championship picture. They're going week to week. And going week to week in terms of planning for shows isn't necessarily a bad thing. It keeps you fresh, it keeps you on your toes. But they're going week to week in the sense that they don't have a clue what's going on. They can barely plan the next day, let alone the next show, or let alone the next pay-per-view, or for WrestleMania season. You know, you hear these rumours and reports around this time of year, these are the tentative plans for WrestleMania, or these are the tentative plans, who might win the Royal Rumble. I guarantee you, Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, they probably have no idea who's going to win the Royal Rumble when it comes to January. And by that I mean probably right now, in their mind, they probably have picked someone. They might say, Big E's going to win the Royal Rumble when it comes to January. By now, and January, and the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, they will change their mind about 100 times, including the day of. Charlotte is the perfect example. Shayna Baszler was scheduled to win the Women's Royal Rumble for months last year. Wouldn't you know it, the day of the pay-per-view, actually we'll have Charlotte Flair win. And that's what happened. Then they had nothing for Charlotte at WrestleMania, so they had to give her Rhea Ripley and the NXT Championship. Look how well that worked out. They change their mind all the time, plans change, because they go week to week, day to day, minute to minute sometimes when it comes to those plans. And the fact that they've switched the WWE Championship 3 times in the last 4 years when it comes to Survivor Series proves just that. And even things that you think have been planned for the long term, like Randy Orton and Edge, it was a lock. We're going to get Edge versus Randy Orton 3 at WrestleMania, and we're going to get the WWE Championship added in there. Is that even safe now? Because to me, it feels like that feud might even be in jeopardy now. I think we might get Edge versus Randy Orton 3 at the Royal Rumble. And then we'll get Edge versus The Fiend at WrestleMania, or Edge versus and Beth Phoenix versus The Fiend and Alexa Bliss at WrestleMania. That's what I think. Now, regardless of the bit of the rant I've gone on there, you do have to question. I've mentioned about them switching the WWE Championship 3 times out of the last 4 years, but is it a bad thing? Is it a bad thing? Because, and I say is it a bad thing because every time they've done this switch, WWE, as a fan base and as a viewer, we've benefited. We've benefited. Brock Lesnar versus Jinder Mahal was the original match. I didn't really care for that match. I think it would have been interesting in hindsight. But I'd much rather have had the AJ Styles-Brock Lesnar match. So instead, we get AJ Styles winning the WWE Championship. Then we get Brock Lesnar versus AJ Styles, one of the best matches in recent Survivor Series history. Fantastic match. And in the next year, as I mentioned, we were going to get Brock Lesnar versus AJ again. I was excited for that match because we got the great match the year prior. But in reality, we'd already seen the match. We'd already seen it already. Instead, the alternative was Daniel Bryan winning the WWE Championship. So that's what happened. Instead, we got Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan. Fantastic match. Great match. If anything, I think that was better than the AJ Brock match. I do. I thought it was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it's the same situation this year. Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns, for me, was an exciting match. I've seen people like Dave Meltzer call it a nothing match, which I both disagree and agree with. And I know you might think, you're sitting on the fence there. I disagree with it being a nothing match because it's Roman Reigns, Randy Orton. It sells itself. It's a pay-per-view worthy match. They haven't had a ton of feuds. I think that's a worthy match. I think that's a pay-per-view worthy match and could main event any pay-per-view and is certainly worthy of main eventing Survivor Series. I don't think it's a nothing match. What I would argue is that this whole pay-per-view is a nothing pay-per-view. It's a nothing pay-per-view. Because the concept of brand supremacy and the concept of brand loyalty doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in this pay-per-view. If you've got these rosters of Raw and SmackDown and you didn't have a draft every year, then maybe you would have some brand loyalty. But some of these guys have been drafted to Raw and some of these guys have been drafted to SmackDown. They've only been on the SmackDown or Raw roster 3 or 4 weeks. How can they be loyal to one brand? If you're the New Day, if you're Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, you've been on SmackDown prior to being drafted this year for like 4 or 5 years. You've been on the SmackDown roster for that long, and now you've been back on Raw for a couple of weeks? I'm a massive Raw guy. I've got all my loyalty to Monday Night Raw. Really? You need time. You need time to build up brand loyalty. You need time to build up brand supremacy. You need to actually have separate viewers to be loyal to one shows. Raw and SmackDown are the same. They're extensions of the same show, which is WWE. They feel exactly the same. So this concept of brand supremacy, brand loyalty, doesn't exist. It worked with NXT last year because NXT is so different to Raw and SmackDown. You do have separate viewers that might just watch NXT but don't watch Raw or SmackDown. And the superstars at NXT, they haven't been on Raw or SmackDown most of the time, and they've come through the system and they want it to succeed. They are loyal to NXT. They do have some brand loyalty there, and they want to prove that they're superior than Raw or SmackDown. It worked. That's why last year worked so well. So every match on this show is a nothing match, but I don't think Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns would have been a nothing match. It's got no stakes, but that's because the concept of Raw or SmackDown doesn't have any stakes, not because Randy Orton and Roman Reigns are nothing superstars, far from it. But, as I mentioned, the change once again has benefited us as a fan base because Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns is a much, much, much more exciting match than Roman Reigns versus Randy Orton. It just is. Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns are the faces of their respective brands. They're two featured players. Drew McIntyre, I was thinking this as well. Drew McIntyre at this point, he is a bona fide superstar in WWE right now. In 2020, it's been his year. He is one of the biggest stars and most marketable stars in WWE right now. Is he on the level of Roman Reigns? It's questionable. We'll find out tonight. In terms of marketability, I think Roman Reigns is the most marketable superstar in WWE right now. He is the top of the food chain and he is the guy. You know, I don't want to be playing into the Roman Reigns promo, but it's true. He is the guy. He's the top star in WWE. But Drew McIntyre is getting there. He really has. And it's only been 2020 that he got his proper main event level push. He has stepped up massively. He has grown massively. He is at that new level. He's at the main event level now. I think he's a bona fide superstar. He is the face of Raw. Roman Reigns is the face of SmackDown. It's the two biggest stars on each brand facing off, which makes it feel like a bigger match. It absolutely does. Now, as I mentioned, is Drew McIntyre on the same level of Roman Reigns? You know, time will only tell when it comes to that. I would probably argue no, but Roman Reigns has been in that main event scene far, far longer, and Roman Reigns has main evented like 4 or 5 WrestleManias at this point. He beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. This is a guy that's got a lot of time and money invested into him. So he should feel like a bigger star than Drew McIntyre, and he does, but not by a lot. Not by a lot. Which, once again, is a massive credit to Drew McIntyre for all that he's achieved in this year. And this year, I don't know if you're aware, has been a dumpster fire of a year. So the fact that he has succeeded and he has grown and he has felt like he's broken through to that next proper main event level, despite the challenges of 2020 and the current climate that we're in, you have to respect that. You really do have to respect that, and I certainly do. And can he get to the same level as Roman Reigns? Can he even surpass Roman Reigns? Only time will tell. Only time will tell. But every time we've had Drew McIntyre, Roman Reigns in the same ring, every time they've had a face-off, every time they've cut a promo, every time they've done anything like that, had any interaction, it's felt big. It's always felt big. It's felt like a big moment and something that we might be playing back in a year or so, or a couple of years or so, and say, man, that was only the start, because this could be a WrestleMania main event in a couple of years' time. It feels big. There is that intangible quality between both superstars that feels big. That feels very, very big. And there is certainly a difference between Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns. And that difference is that Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns feels bigger. It feels bigger. And obviously we didn't get any interactions between Reigns and Orton, so I don't know if that would have felt bigger. But to me, even on paper, without any interactions, this match would have felt bigger. It feels like a big pay-per-view main event. Remember, Survivor Series is meant to be one of the top 4 when it comes to the pay-per-views, right? You've got the Royal Rumble, you've got WrestleMania, you've got SummerSlam, you've got Survivor Series. Survivor Series is that pay-per-view that's kind of died off, to be honest, over the last few years, and you've still got Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam being big shows, and Survivor Series doesn't feel like that anymore. But this feels like a big pay-per-view main event. This feels like, man, we're seeing something special here. The best of Raw versus the best of SmackDown, and that's what it feels like. Now, in terms of a prediction for this match, who do I think is going to win between the WWE Champion Drew McIntyre and the Universal Champion Roman Reigns? I think it's a really hard one to call. I do think it's a very hard one to call. Both guys are extremely protected, and they don't do many, if any, losses. And those losses very rarely are clean too. I think that would have been the thing when it came to Roman Reigns versus Randy Orton, is it would have been a lot easier to call because, as I mentioned, Randy Orton's been losing most of the time over the spring and the summer anyway. Roman Reigns would have probably just beat him. Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns is a lot harder to call. A lot harder to call because they're so extremely protected. Drew McIntyre has been pinned, what, twice in a year? I think twice clean in a year, something like that. Roman Reigns hasn't even lost since he returned back at SummerSlam. So it's a tough one to call. You do have to wonder, are we going to get a clean finish? I don't know if we will. I feel like we're going to get a screwy finish, which leads me to think maybe Randy Orton gets involved. If you've just lost the WWE Championship on Monday, you'd be pretty pissed and want to get involved and cost the guy who, this was meant to be Randy Orton versus Roman Reigns, right? From a Randy Orton point of view, you could get involved and say, that was my spotlight, you took it from me, and you took my title. Maybe Randy Orton gets involved. We know a Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus feud is happening. Sheamus has been giving pep talks to Drew McIntyre backstage. He even gifted Drew McIntyre a kilt and a sword Monday night on Raw. We know they're best friends, but we know the betrayal is coming. When it comes to WWE, if you're best friends, it's a matter of time before one friend throws you through that plain class barbershop quartet window. It's the same when it comes to Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. So maybe Sheamus gets involved and costs his best friend his biggest match of his career, one of the biggest matches of his career. Maybe it gets involved there. If Randy Orton or Sheamus does get involved and they attack Drew McIntyre, who's to say The Miz won't cash in? Maybe The Miz will cash in as well. He's been floating around. I don't think he does. As I mentioned, I think The Miz cashes in 2021. But like I said in this video, WWE goes week to week, hour to hour, minute to minute, day to day. They could have changed plans 500 times today when it comes to maybe The Miz might cash in or not. So don't rule that out as well. And I thought this, and this is a million miles away, and I don't think it will happen. What a time for Brock Lesnar to return. And I know people will roll their eyes and go, oh, no, we don't have Brock Lesnar return. But what a time it would be for him to return tonight at Survivor Series. He's got a history of both men. Drew McIntyre beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship. We haven't seen Brock Lesnar since. Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar have faced each other about 1 million times. And they've got certainly history. They've got multiple matches at WrestleMania too. They've got history. Paul Heyman is now in the corner of Roman Reigns. Maybe Brock Lesnar comes out and says, Paul, what are you doing with Roman? Why are you here? Now, it's very unlikely, of course, Brock Lesnar's WWE contract has expired, and we don't know if or when that's going to resolve itself. We don't know when that's going to resolve itself. Nevertheless, I just don't see Brock Lesnar returning, to be honest. I don't think Brock Lesnar will... I don't think he signed a new contract. I don't think he will return tonight. I think he'll return eventually. I just don't think he'll return tonight at Survivor Series. But just imagine he did. I think the internet would explode and it would be absolutely hilarious if that was the case. But if I have to put a prediction, if I had to put my neck out on the line, I'm going to go with Roman Reigns to win somehow. Whether it's interference, Sheamus, Randy Orton... I think Roman Reigns will come out here victorious. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre tonight? Universal Champion versus WWE Champion. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chat about Survivor Series with you. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.